Umamusume dropped some new characters again, and this is a weekly occurrence, of course, as they have this accelerated schedule. This time around, we do have the new princess/dress outfits going on for the characters, and let me know if you guys decide to pull. So that's pretty cool, of course. I think they look great in these outfits, so hopefully you guys get your favorite character if you're going to pull for them. Oh, look at Maya no Top Gun. She looks so cute. All right, so aside from that, I wanted to talk about the fact that Umamusume has been absolutely killing it. And this is not news. This is not new. In fact, if you go back to a few years back, the original Umamusume release, that game just took the world by storm as well. So it stands to reason that when the global version comes out, you can expect something similar. And that is absolutely the case. Now, is this going to be the constant, never-ending trend for Umamusume Global? Certainly not. There are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be peaks and valleys. That is going to be something that happens here. But it is actually encouraging with this accelerated release schedule and all that stuff that we have on global that the game is still absolutely killing it. Especially the fact is that with the fact that we have the foresight, excuse me, I was gonna say hindsight, but the foresight, because that is one thing that also inevitably kind of plagues these global games, and that's why they try to, change the release order or speed things up, all these other things that they try to do to usurp the player's knowledge, right? Because players know what to summon for, players know what to skip for, and especially with like Umamusume, I see a new video every other day. Shoot, I may need to make one of those because they always do great viewership, where it's like, you should summon for this, save for this, all the best banners coming up in the next year. Like, we have so much information, right? So it is actually pretty encouraging that it's still doing really well. But I don't want to say that to say that everything on the free-to-play side is great in terms of rewards and stuff. That can always be improved, right? All right, so Umamusume Pretty Derby has earned $46.8 million outside of Japan since global release, representing 57% of total player spending since. That's ridiculous. Since June, almost $50 million? Japan remains the game's most lucrative market at 35.4 since June 26th. Followed by the U.S. with 31. Umamusume has generated 57% of global mobile revenue outside of Japan since its worldwide rollout. Do you know how insane that is? That is ridiculous. They are accounting for 60% of the global mobile game revenue outside of Japan since the release of this game. That's unheard of. Like, I don't know that we've seen another game come global that's able to do this, especially not for multiple months, right? This is ridiculous. After 4 years in Japan, Cygames' Horse Girl racing game debuted on global on June 26, 2025. In 2 months, it has picked up another $35 million in its home country while racing to 46.8 overseas. So it also is, again, like we mentioned earlier, doing great overseas still, too. While I said there are peaks and valleys, this game has certainly had them in their 4-year span on the Japanese side. It's still killing it today in Japan. So, like, this has become, honestly, especially obviously in Japan, we haven't really got the chance to really get to this point yet here. I don't know if we will. Culturally, things are just different. But it's become a cultural phenomenon in Japan. It has. It's insane, the success that this has garnered. Anyway. In 2 months, it's picked up 35, according to AppMagic estimates of player spending on Google Play and the App Store. The U.S. has led overseas spending at $31 million over 2 months with the title, making the market Umamusume's second most lucrative worldwide. Players in the U.S. spent 87% as much as those in Japan over that period. Canada follows as the third highest spending market. So it's not even just that it's killing it, like, globally. It's that they're killing it in the U.S. Like, look at this graph. It's Japan, and then it's the U.S., and then it's, like, Canada is third, and they're, like, what is that, like 3 million? Like, that's like, what that looks like. So, they are killing it in the U.S. specifically with these sales. That is ridiculous. They are doing amazing things. A marathon or a sprint. Umamusume Pretty Derby trotted to financial success. Oh, they're talking about what I was talking about earlier. In 2021, as the year's biggest mobile hit in Japan, it became Cygames' flagship game and dominated the country's charts for 2 years running. But spending has slumped year over year since release. From almost $1 billion almost, in 2021 down to $331 million in 2024. The title's global release has come far from the game's peak player spending, but is a move that appears to reflect confidence in Western receptiveness to Japanese media. That's another thing too. Well, like I said, the culture stuff is very different, but if you were around, one, yes, but if you were old enough to realize it, back in the early 2000s especially, but let's go back. I'm 31, right? Just for context. Born 93. But you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, and into the mid 2000s, anime was this thing where it's like, there were some that, like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Dragon Ball, where it was like okay to watch, and Pokemon maybe became the one that's like, because it was, I guess, more geared towards kids than the other two of those three I mentioned were. There were some others, of course, that were out there, like Yu Yu Hakusho, others. You would also be able to watch like Inuyasha, all these other things, right? But anyway, long story short, anime wasn't really all that popular. It was very niche, and it wasn't really cool to watch. However, into the 2010s and since, anime has boomed into this thing that's the exact opposite. Everybody is on anime. Anime is cool. Like, you could walk down the street wearing an anime shirt and people wouldn't bat an eye at it, right? In fact, more people would probably think it looks cool than otherwise, right? If you were to wear that back then, people would look at you like you're like crazy. Like, what the hell is that? Like, you nerd, like this and that. Like, it's entirely different. Like I said, while it's not the same culture here in the US as it is in Japan, of course, it's still not close. The US has been extremely receptive to anime over the last decade plus. And that is massive, and you see it here, right? We knew this game was coming. I didn't expect the US to rival Japan's latest sales. Now, Japan, I'm sure, has done better than this before, but this is just the most recent numbers, right? So that's incredible. All right. Umamusume generated 22.8 million outside of Japan during its global version's first 30 days and has more than doubled this sum another month later. It's crazy that they doubled it after the global launch month. Because for a lot of games, in fact, if they don't have like a super strong IP, which Umamusume actually is, it developed into that, right? If they don't have a super strong IP, that's the best month they're ever gonna have, right? They may have similar-ish numbers where they're like 80% of what their global launch is around like their anniversary stuff, but they're not able to typically get back to that peak. But they were able to exceed that basically. In the following month. Like, that's crazy. Its share of overseas spending has grown from just over 50 after 1 month to 57 after 2, and not due to any notable decline in Japanese spending. Though with the title having generated over 2.5 billion in Japan before its global rollout, the overseas market currently represents just 3% of lifetime player spending. Cygames' latest title, Shadowverse Worlds Beyond, meanwhile, launched in Japan and overseas on June 17th and has made 11% of its player spending outside of Cygames' home country. The digital TCG saw a 786% spending surge after the debut of its first new card set. Yeah, well, any game that released within, let's say, a 30-day span before or after Umamusume, it got cannibalized. It did. In fact, let's list out a few other examples. There were a few games that released either on the same day as Umamusume or within like 48 hours of Umamusume. Persona came out, and that game had its own controversies, but it was never going to compete with this. Frankly, none of the games were. Shoot, like I said earlier, there are not games that do this, period. That's why this is so ridiculous. Persona would have been good if they did a fifth of those numbers. Like, that would have been considered a good success. In fact, they might have done about it. I have to go back and pull it. I don't want to like crap on it like they didn't do good numbers. I don't know what their numbers were for the first 30 days. I didn't really do a video like this for them, so I'd have to go back and confirm. But if they did 10 million, that's a good month. That's a really, really good month, right? So anyway, and that's not a fifth of this, but just throwing a number out there. But anyway, any other game like Marvel Mystic Mayhem came out. Marvel IP, which has actually a really checkered history with us. You would think it would do better. That game, I'm expecting end of service announcement any day now, because it's just and so much of it comes down to like, it's IP, yes, but so much of it also comes down to like online perception. For example, if people aren't talking about your game online, if there's not like dedicated communities that are big, because every game has a community, but like big communities, then and like you can also really tell this by going to YouTube and seeing the viewership of videos on this, particularly like a month out, because the first few weeks everybody eats, but then after that, it really, as a YouTuber, it really condenses, and only a few people are able to get viewership. That's not the case. Like in Umamusume, you can find a video from a random creator, and that video can go, I don't want to say viral, but they could be a brand new YouTuber, and it could do like 40,000 views if it's a good topic, right? So you could really see that, and with a game like Marvel Mystic Mayhem, they may be lucky to get 5,000 views on the video. Like that's a huge difference, ridiculous. Otherwise, on average, it's like 1,000, 2,000. So that game again came out same period. There's so many things about it, like the community online, like I was explaining, and then also things like the IP, of course. Although I would argue that obviously the Marvel IP is one of the better ones you could have to make a game around. But anyway, especially on the heels of Rivals, right, and developed by the same devs as Rivals. Anyway. A lot of it also is just the way that the game is perceived online, how word of mouth is, how you treat your players, all that stuff. And is Umamusume hitting perfectly on all of those things? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Leave it in the comments down below. What do you guys think? But overall, massive success, and hopefully this just means that this game gets more resources, devoted to it. They could have 5 teams already. Shoot, get 5 more. Get 5 more. I want all the resources here. I want this to be the best game as humanly possible. I want it to be better than the Japanese counterpart. How about that?